All right, and we are live. So this is Charles Elwood again. I was going to do this as a Wednesday ramblings, but Wednesday I was booked up, so it's Thursday ramblings today. And we're just going to get right into it. So I'm going to do very little introductions, and we're just going to get right into it. And the other thing is, I want to explain a little bit about, LinkedIn Live is brand new. And one of the things that's hard to work with is the comments take about, 40 seconds, up to 40 seconds to come back. So, if you're watching live and you see this in about 40 seconds, let us know where you're from. Let us know that you're on, so that we can, ask you questions. Or, if you have questions for Andrew and Tyler, ask them, because they've both been in the AI, machine learning, and BI world, and that's why I invited both of them. Those are things I'm curious about. So write your comments in, and then if you really want to, come join the show. We did this last time with Andrew. Wasn't it fun, Andrew? You jumped on.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Yeah. And Tyler, you were contributing with comments. So we were taking your comments, feeding them right to Andrew. So if you're comfortable with that, chime in with comments. We'll send them to the other two guys. So Tyler, I'm going to start with you. And Andrew, maybe you can watch for the comments, when the live stream comes up. But Tyler, so AI, just a little bit about my journey into, and I'm curious about your journey is, I started by binge reading about data science. I was like, ooh, this is fun. And then that kind of led me into blockchain, and I started LinkedIn Learning. I went into LinkedIn Learning and I was like, ooh, blockchain, this is fascinating. Distributed ledger, and then I came back. I was like, okay, that's kind of like, blockchain, it's Bitcoin, and it's all kind of wrapped up into that. Let me go back in data science. And then I binge watch LinkedIn Learning on AI, machine learning, and all the different variations and flavors. And I'm still a little bit confused about that. So maybe you can kind of help us understand that, and Andrew can chime in too. But there's, like with BI too, there was, and then I got into BI, right? Which is really the gateway to all of this stuff. So I got into BI, I was looking at Power BI, with Tableau, ClickView, Qlicksense. And, I was like, Power BI seems like the one, I was watching Google Trends. I was like, ooh, this thing's taken off. And I think that's about the same time I started my business. And it's about the same time you contacted me on LinkedIn. It's like, hey, I'm looking for any BI work, this stuff is super powerful. So I wanted to query you a little bit. So how did you get to this point? You're along the BI, but you've got a little more of the AI machine learning stuff too. And then we'll wrap Andrew up into this conversation because he's kind of taking that route too. So Tyler, tell me how you got into where you are, and and then afterwards maybe a little bit into the future of what's next. What are the languages you guys look at, and especially Andrew, he's deep into the technical stuff. So
actually, so I really started out in the BI. That kind of fell into my lap early in my career when I started working for General Motors, and I started to really understand just how powerful the data analytics was and how I could influence a lot of people through data and moving projects along. It wasn't really until I started working at my current company, Freightverify, and where I really understood the power of machine learning and AI. And so I really just started being interested simply because I wanted to learn how to do it, right? I wanted to be able to jump into something like that if I was asked to do a project. So I jumped on Udemy, and I found a machine learning course by Jose Portilla, who I really recommend anyone watching can go out and look at his classes. And he has a great machine learning class, or at least an introduction to it. And I just started, it's a 55-hour class, and I just sort of jumped in. He said, it would be nice if you had some Python experience before, but I said, nah, I'll be fine. I'll learn along the way. And so I started working my way through this class and learning how to do basically everything I've done in SQL and Tableau and Power BI, now in Python. So, that was my first real foray into kind of the machine learning world. And I'm very new to it still. I profess that I've got a long way to go. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what other projects I can utilize Python and machine learning at work. And so that's really where it began, was just an interest in wanting to adapt and learn new skills.
Wow, cool. Yeah, thanks for that journey. I wrote a few things down here. So one of the things that really got me, and I've been thinking about this a lot, is how data can be, if you get the insights out of it, how it can influence, right? How it can, it really, you can take data, you get the insights, and then you have the patterns to back it up. It's like, hey, my theory was this, and look at the data. It shows that this is what's happening, and then you can influence decisions, some big decisions, right? So any examples of that in terms of experience on why you came to that conclusion, how influence, how data can influence?
It was a little bit subtle. I go back to one of the projects when I was, like I said, working at GM. Is we had some very simple questions about the business, right? Very simple data points. How much is coming in? How long is it staying here? And how much is going out, right? And that was something so simple wasn't known, right? We just didn't know. We didn't have the data. We didn't know where to go get it or how to collect it, really. So it was really, the journey started with, well, where do I go and get that data, right? How do I aggregate it and have it make sense, right? And then we started putting dashboards together, things that kind of automatically updated and allow people to interact with this data that they hadn't really seen before or had been kind of hidden behind closed doors, right? So all of a sudden I started seeing myself in more higher level meetings and presenting this stuff out and realizing, wow, we're driving true insight into how the business is working and validating our assumptions or otherwise not. And so I think the realization of what I was doing and how it was influencing folks was when we decided to go on a roadshow and show the product, kind of like how you would marketing your own company's product. We went out into the organization and said, hey, look at what we found. Look at what we're doing with this. Here's how we can save money. And then it just really snowballed from there, right? Once you start saying, hey, I can save everyone a bunch of money, then really people start kind of listening and understanding the value of some of this stuff. So it was really organic. It wasn't something that, it's obviously something you read in a textbook, right? When you go through your MBA and even your bachelor's, you got to bring data to the table. And it's one thing to read that, but it is totally another thing to actually source it, analyze it, and then bring some sort of recommendation to the table. That was probably one of the biggest growth spurts in my early career.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's and there's a parallel in my world. So I was doing kind of what you were doing. I was doing it in Excel and pivot charts, and nobody had looked at some data. And it was just really simple stuff, but nobody had ever just looked at it, and saw the patterns. And I remember presenting that, and they're like, wow, and then what ended up kind of like the same thing you were saying is then they made me into a head of the BI department, right? And then I had 2 interns working for me, and I was like, wow, there's something different about this. Like every other job I've had, you don't just make a department and say, let's go. And like you said, then I was going around to different departments and kind of doing a roadshow. So then that's when you realize there's something different about what's going on here and the tools that are available now, right? So no, that's a good point. And there's a parallel there too. So, but I do want to make sure I wrap in Andrew here. So Tyler, along the lines of what, that's great stuff. Udemy, Jose, what was the name of the guy?
Portilla.
And he kind of, he was saying, Python sounds like one of the, languages that you would want to study and be ready for, right? And you could just kind of slammed yourself into that, but other people may.
Yeah. A little more gentle approach, yeah.
Yes. So Andrew, I'm curious to, your approach. What languages have you brought to the table? What were you learning? And you went to Michigan Tech, I believe, right?
Yeah,
You know,
way
we're
up in
there.
the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Yeah.
Yeah, and then during the winters you're locked inside, so you can have time to study those languages.
There's nothing to do but study.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Perfect.
I don't know. But yeah, so I got my start in machine learning or artificial intelligence stuff about 8 years ago as I was wrapping up my education. Yeah, I didn't start off in Python. I now use Python on a daily basis, and all the biggest frameworks for machine learning like Pytorch or TensorFlow, those are all Python based. So if you're looking to get into this stuff, Python is definitely something you're going to want to either introduce yourself to or make sure your skills are right up there. I actually started with Matlab way back in the day. Doing stuff for the automotive industry. And my early career brought me through a whole bunch of computer vision applications that were usually on-device algorithms as opposed to in the cloud. So most of my early experience was in C and C++, which works really well if you want to get your end algorithm on a device. But there's more and more opportunities within TensorFlow and Pytorch to kind of compile your Python model down into an embeddable algorithm into your device. So really, I'm still doing a little bit of C, C++ every now and then, kind of for embedded projects, but the bulk of the development is in Python.
So yeah, break that down for me. So I'm not familiar, I'll admit, Python's kind of foreign to me. I've dabbled a little bit, Hello World and stuff. But Pytorch, TensorFlow, what are what's the framework? Where do they sit,
Right. So
in terms of language, is it a framework for the language?
Yeah, they're a framework. So you basically are writing Python, but TensorFlow is put out there open source by Google. It's their main framework for machine learning. So you learn Python and then you think, sweet, I've got this down. And then you kind of have to learn TensorFlow's flavor of Python. Same thing with Pytorch, which I think was Facebook who put that out. There was a different C-based model. I think that was just called Torch. And then Facebook made a Python interface that's taken off. So,
and then just help me real quick. So if you want to develop embedded, code that sits on the device, you use C, C++. If you want to build something up in the cloud that manages or looks through data up in the cloud, it's more, then you take the Python because it's more of a.
Yeah, it kind of depends on your application. But if you're trying to put something on a microcontroller or a small processor, like an STM32, I don't know if that means stuff to people, but yeah, you often have to scale down the size of model that you want to go after and kind of go back to some more classical methods and then write those in C, C++. If you're in the cloud, I would not waste your time with C, C++, because it's a really powerful language, C or C++, but you have to compile it. In the cloud, there's all these issues with compiling. It's a lot slower to deal with. Python is a really nice scripting language. It's interpreted, so you don't have to have a runtime, or I should say you don't have to compile it down. All these cloud providers already have the runtime ready to go for you.
Gotcha. And then, so how did you choose between Pytorch and TensorFlow? Are people gravitating towards one or the other, or it's just kind of a free for all right now?
Well, if you're at Google, you're definitely not using Pytorch. But usually my choice of those frameworks is mostly driven by what the client wants in the end. So I'm most comfortable with TensorFlow. So if I'm given the choice, I usually run with that. But yeah, I won't say they're like similar where you can just transfer your knowledge from one to the other. But they have very similar goals. So once you kind of get the concept of how to use a framework for machine learning, all of those concepts transfer. It turns into more of like a syntax thing than anything else.
I
All
would
right,
recommend using TensorFlow as well.
TensorFlow, okay. Yeah, interesting. All right. One question I had, so we'll do one more with Andrew, and then we'll try to bring Tyler back into the conversation. So the other week, I think a lot of people, and including myself, are like, how do I apply AI? Where does it fit into my organization? And who would I go to bring artificial intelligence into my organization? And you brought up an interesting question because you saw me, I did that 3D printer farm. It was kind of an interesting thing because we had, 400 printers scattered throughout the nation, and a couple worldwide, and they were printing and I was taking data on all the prints that were coming in every day, location, quantity, all kinds of good stuff. And I was plotting them, in charts online. So Andrew, you contacted me though, and you said, would this organization 3DC19 that you have, this group of 3D printers, could you use AI to look at some of the data, right? And you remember you asked me that, and I was like, I don't know, like look at some of the data I have. And you said, yeah, this might not be the right application, but you came up with some ideas where it would work. And I wonder if we walk through that thinking, how does a manager of a business think about how AI could apply to their business? What's an application? And maybe we could use the 3D printer thing as an example.
Yeah, sure. So it's tough to boil down where AI could be applied to any organization because it's a technology that is often compared to like the internet, right? Like every business can apply the internet. How they use the internet's totally different, whether you're e-commerce or you're a performance group or whatever, right? Like the internet's about connecting and sharing information. AI is all about processing information and sometimes generating insights and oftentimes just generating more questions, which I think is valuable in and of itself, right? So usually when a group has very little data, large organizations have plenty of data, and oftentimes they've already gotten their start in AI and machine learning. So I like to focus on the smaller companies or mid-sized companies that maybe have some data, but it's not structured. It's just kind of ad hoc used. The first things I usually look for are opportunities to estimate what might be coming a day or a week or a month in advance, depending on the application. Or I look for operational bottlenecks, right? Like what's something that you have to staff up people for, and it's a little bit more of a routine thing that you're just chugging through, especially if it's mistake prone, right? So I'm always a little hesitant suggesting those right off the bat because people's mind goes straight to AI replaces jobs. But to be frank, it's really not that good yet in many cases, especially if you're applying it in a smaller mid-sized business. It's much more like giving your employees superpowers, right? You're able to check work, you're able to get more things done, you're able to provide additional enriched data as a result of that processing. So those are kind of the major places where smaller businesses are applying those, sort of the estimation of the future or prediction, a lot of people like to say.
Yeah. Oh, that's
process automation.
And this brings up an interesting, you say it's not advanced, developed enough yet. And I remember working on some natural language stuff. This was like 6 years ago, but you were still inputting all the phrases that people could say. It was supposed to be, the idea was you could say anything, it would figure it out, but you were still setting up the phrases, and I did that with Amazon Echo. They could do a skill. And I played with the skill. You could, but you still had to type in all the different flavors of what people could say. And I was like, well, that's not, what we're really after, is the real advanced AI where it can figure out those patterns and say, okay, I think you're saying this, but these were still, kind of the preliminary ones where you were developing everything.
A lot of times when people are bringing in applications like that, the process is often you have humans annotating data, right?
Yeah.
So there's some data that comes in and humans have to come up with the answer for that initial batch of info, and then train up an algorithm, and then you deploy it. And when somebody gives you an answer, you can, there are ways to understand how, I don't want to say confident, but like how confident the model is in its answer.
Yeah.
And companies that apply AI effectively use that confidence to understand unique data points and use that to say, these unique data points that's not very confident in, we're going to have humans annotate that. Otherwise, we're going to let the algorithm continue putting out automated answers, right? So there's always humans in the loop that's involved in improving the algorithm over time. And that's why it's not a replacement thing. You're just elevating the task that people get to perform as an expert.
Yeah. No, good points. Good points. So Tyler, we're gonna try to reel you back in here. So, you know, and I'm on this parallel path with you with BI stuff too. And just from experience, so you know, PowerBI, they're starting to integrate some AI in there, where they do some auto, you know, I think the decision tree, and there's a few other, you know, you can do some natural language question asking. But you know, from your standpoint, what are people asking? You know, is it mostly BI? Because that's well, AI and BI, those, you know, business intelligence are both kind of big keywords. But how do people, you know, how do they come to you when they have an application that requires AI? Are there certain, you know, how does a manager say, I think I need AI, and what questions do they ask of you? And are there applications that you can talk about, you know, of AI that you've been asked to develop?
That's a good question. I think, and I don't know that I've been asked personally, but I have been on a project where there really needs to be a distinction between what is AI and machine learning versus what is a really great understanding of the descriptive statistics of a data set, right? So there are times where we want to say, as an organization, we have AI capabilities and machine learning capabilities, but it's really, we have a really great understanding of the statistics, and a BI dashboard makes more sense, right? Because in order to really employ a machine learning or AI model, you have to be able to encode all of that human thought. And really all you're doing is then just automating that and scaling it several times larger than one brain, right? Yeah. So I think the biggest distinction when we're looking at, you know, do we employ an AI versus a BI solution? It really comes, I think it's more of a chicken before the egg. I think it's BI first, really understand the data and the behaviors behind what's causing that data, and then, or what's driving the behaviors behind that data. And then it's, okay, we know enough about this where we think we can actually take those learnings and apply all of those things to a larger data set, or all of the data, or maybe we just have the current data set we have and we just continue to iterate on top of. I think a lot of businesses will struggle with the attaching onto the buzzwords, right? Like big data, dashboarding, AI, machine learning, like those are all huge words that have very specific almost uses and definitions in a way, right? And but we tend to apply them to all kinds of different use cases. So I think the biggest suggestion that maybe I would have for a business looking to understand, okay, do I have a BI solution and an AI, or both, or is really understand the data first, right? Really make sure that the data reflects how the business works, and then try and go and understand how can I apply machine learning and artificial intelligence.
No, that's a great point. And I've been reading and doing some stuff recently to kind of rebrand and reframe, because there are buzzwords, and the expectations about the buzzwords are all over the place. So somebody that comes and asks you for AI, you're like, what does that mean? So along the lines of what you said, Andrew, I start asking now, it's like, what are what do you think are some bottlenecks in your processes, or which process is broken? Or, what are some predictive analytics that, what things would you like to analyze and understand, and maybe failures that are coming up in the future? Which ones would you like to see? And when you start asking about their problems, then you can kind of pick which tool works best, right? So I've been kind of switching to that mode and kind of moving away from the buzzwords, because, yeah, kind of like what you were just saying there, Tyler, is people are using buzzwords, but the meaning behind it isn't quite there.
Always go back to process first. I mean, that's the first thing I go to is some sort of value stream map, some sort of process map, and then pick, one or two metrics that you really want to focus on. Yeah. Because if you try and do all of them, you're going to overwhelm yourself. And I think it's important to stay focused on the key things early, and then really start to scale up. And just like Andrew and I were talking about building Python scripts the other day, start little, start iterative, and then you can scale up as you get more successful from your first step.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Scale up, start small. And we've talked about that, Andrew, on our last one too. So we got our first question, and then after this, we got about 10 minutes left. And I want to go into some personal goal questions. So maybe we got a question from Rosa. So how do you choose between R and Python? So R, I have that actually on my questions too. So if one of you has any insight on R and Python and the differences, that's probably a good thing to spell out for people.
I have tried to use R once, but between Matlab and Python, I've had everything that I've needed to use. So personally, I don't have any experience with R, but the groups of people that I see using R tend to come from more of a statistics background than an engineering background. So I don't think there's probably, a big reason to choose one or the other than how productive you can be with either or, right? If you're going to be getting into machine learning, I'm not sure if there's packages in R for machine learning. If there are, great. But if you're getting into machine learning, the heavy hitters are definitely using Python. So that'd be the separation that I'd put, would be more the data science, statistics, would probably fit better in the R bucket if that's what you're comfortable with. But again, I've never used it myself, so.
Yeah, and Tyler, maybe you can jump in. So Power BI, I try to stay in my little swim lane with DAX and M, because Power BI can go all over the place. But I've seen the modules for R and Python, and I haven't used either one. But I think Python was more for the special graphics or special visualizations, right? And then the R side maybe for custom statistics. But maybe you have some insight, or have you played with those?
I was asked today if we could leverage the queries and code I used in Python in a Power BI dashboard. So I haven't really played with it yet. It looks like I'm going to very quickly here. I really like Python for its simplicity, and maybe that's just because I'm brand new to programming, and it's something I kind of see on the internet as Python is a good starting point for a lot of programmers, from what I understand, right? It reads really well. The syntax is pretty similar. So I really like Python just simply because of Seaborn, Matplotlib, and some of the other data visualization packages that reflect really well on what you see in something like a Tableau or a Power BI. Granted, you have a lot more customization in Python, right? But ultimately, you get similar functionality as what you would get in a Power BI or in a Tableau. They've just packaged it such that the quote-unquote normal person can go out and do it, right? And without having that Python knowledge. So that's what I really like about Python. I've heard also that R is definitely geared more towards the stats folks who really are just looking at statistical things, and I would say data, maybe expand that to data science. My wife works as an actuarial analyst at Ally, and I guess the everyone likes to use code in from an actuarial perspective, I guess. So, so yeah, they really like to use R. The shop that I work in heavily uses Python, so it made sense for me to learn Python and be able to contribute to that development. And so that's kind of why I chose Python.
No, that's a good point. That brings me to the parallel. So we got about 5 minutes left. I just switched to QuickBooks for my business, and the main reason was my accountant is familiar with QuickBooks. Right? There's Xero, there's and.co, there's all these, and Andrew, you probably know. So yeah, you kind of, what's your environment? What are your peers working on? What's your company using? And that's an interesting corollary. Is for my business, I was like, this makes sense. So back to you, Andrew. I want to ask. So we're going to switch a little bit into business and kind of goals and stuff. But you have a business, Deos Ballet, and I believe another business, the consulting business too. But along the lines of your business, the ballet business, you recently made the decision, I think, to have a board of advisors for your company. And what led you to that? And what is the purpose? You kind of explained it to me, but I'm curious, on how you came to that and how long it took. It's been a few years, right? Deos has been around.
Yeah, we've been operating for about 2.5 years now. So, we, my wife and I operate this professional ballet company. I do not dance at all. I can try, but you won't want to see me perform. So she's the classically trained ballet dancer who does the choreography, and I just do business stuff. The arts industry, performing arts industry, is really, really tough to break into and make something new. So as we were getting our start in it, we are trying out all kinds of different things that are atypical for a professional ballet company. And as we were trying to sort through the opportunities that we saw, we got involved in a local program on the west side of Michigan, in Holland, Michigan. It was called Boostcamp. It was a bunch of entrepreneurs, their businesses, coming together and helping each other work on their businesses. It's a fantastic program. We learned a ton of stuff. And one of the main recommendations was you need to have an advisory board. And had I heard that recommendation before doing the program, I would have been like, nobody knows my business better than me. So I get why bouncing ideas off of people is important, but there's a bunch of people in the industry I can just do that with, right? But getting to be part of a community that like really cares about your business, even though they don't know anything about it, you get to see like how powerful having outside people who know nothing about what you're doing, how they can just come up with the dumbest questions, right? That make you think and go, wow, that is a huge assumption that I just ran with that we need to go challenge now.
Yeah.
So maybe a little long-winded, but that's how we came to, we really need to have an advisory board of people who don't know ballet. Help us build a ballet company.
Wow, no, that's we've talked about it. So no, that's a great insight, and that Surge camp, that's a really good camp. So
yeah,
so I was a part of that too. So I, disclosure, I was in that camp. So that's great. So Tyler, so we're gonna jump to you for kind of our closing comments here. But I remember when I asked you if you wanted to join this LinkedIn Live, feed last week. And you said, yeah, one of my goals is to do a TED Talk, right? So, just kind of your story on that, that, how did that become a goal, and what else, do you have ideas on topics, or where did that come about,
So it really started when I was in high school. I went to an international baccalaureate high school. And so I went through their IB program, and I had a lot of very impactful teachers that really kind of defined who I ended up becoming, probably as both an academic and professional. But a lot of them introduced us to TED Talks. And I had always appreciated looking at the TED Talks or watching the TED Talks when we had the opportunity to. And so that just kind of stuck with me. I've never really been a great public speaker. I maybe been a little bit nervous, but it wasn't until college that I got comfortable and really starting to think about what I wanted to do and what kind of goals I had for my life. And I actually, strangely enough, I had sticky notes on my wall when I was living at my grandparents at the time. And I had a whole wall of sticky notes of the things I wanted to do, like be a CEO or be a manager. And one of the sticky notes that stuck in my head was I want to do a TED Talk. And so I think there was a TED Talk by, I think his name was Sir Keith Richardson, about education in America and the essentially killing of creativity. And that was all my favorite TED Talk, and I still watch it every once in a while. And so topics, that's one of the things that I guess I've been struggling with is, what do I go talk about? I think if I had to pick one topic today, it would be something to do with data, right? Some application of machine learning or AI that really helped someone out, really helped a company out, a really great use case. I'm sure that'll evolve over time. I'm sure I'll have lots of things that I want to talk about. I tend to jump between specialties and jobs. So who knows? But hopefully it's something I can come up with that's interesting and that people care about. And so, yeah, that's been a long time goal of mine.
Sweet. I'm glad I brought that up. That's a good story, both of your stories. So I'm gonna wrap it up with two conclusions that I got out of that. So it was, strangely enough, I got out a lot out of that first part, AI, machine learning, BI. But what was really cool was those last two stories. So the power of connections from you, Andrew, and just having diverse ideas is just to help you, just challenge the assumptions, try something new, and having that bouncing board. And then the connections can help promote and share your story too. So all those people that are going to be on your board now are going to learn your story and potentially spread the word to, their connections too. So powerful stuff there. And then Tyler, your thought on what topic, and then, what I've seen in all of us today is I wasn't as nervous about this talk because I'm so passionate about data and BI and the original story of how powerful it is, how it's changed our lives, right? So, and I think that's a fitting story for your TED Talk is because I see the passion, when you talk about data, about BI, the passion comes through, right? So I can't wait until you get on TED and then, I'll be there to watch it when you go live with that. So, so yeah, that's my ending thoughts. Andrew or Tyler, anything else or from you guys?
I don't know. Andrew and I had a pretty great conversation the other day. I'm so glad I checked into that first LinkedIn live stream because, man, we spent an hour on the phone the other day and it was great. I got a cool mentoring session out of it and we talked through some things and I learned some Python, some more Python and debugged some code. So it was pretty great. I'm happy I was on here. I'm happy I found the live stream. So
yeah, well, let's keep doing this.
Thanks for
so you guys, if you go out, find some more people that are just as passionate and crazy about BI, AI, machine learning as us. We'll put a couple weeks out. Let's schedule some more people and get more people in this conversation because the more we talk about it and we have the examples. We're kind of spearheading this and we're seeing it, the impact of power and of data and the insights. So let's do this again, guys. It's been a lot of fun, right? So.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks again.
We'll see you in a couple weeks. Yep. Bye. And broadcast. All right.